Have you ever woken up in the morning, checked your blood sugar, and it's already high? You haven't eaten anything. You didn't snack overnight. You tried to eat perfectly the day before, and yet somehow your glucose is still elevated. And the first thing you think isn't just frustration, it's confusion. Did I eat the wrong thing yesterday? Should I cut more carbs? Is my body just getting worse? Then you go online looking for answers, and suddenly you're drowning in completely contradictory advice. One expert says, morning workouts are the best for blood sugar. Another says, no, afternoon exercise is better. And someone else tells you to do fasted, high-intensity interval training at sunrise because it supposedly burns fat faster. Now, exercise, something that should help you, suddenly becomes another confusing rule you're afraid to get wrong. So in this video, we're going to remove all that noise and replace it with physiology. But before we start, if you want the free guide that shows you exactly how to restore insulin sensitivity with food and exercise, comment guide below and we'll send it to you. By the end of this video, you'll understand what the research actually says about morning versus afternoon versus evening exercise, why some workouts can temporarily raise glucose even though they're beneficial, how menopause changes the equation, and how to choose the timing and type of exercise that actually lowers blood sugar while restoring insulin sensitivity at the root cause. This is not about hacks. This is not about chasing a perfect workout window. This is about fixing insulin resistance so your body can regulate glucose the way it was designed to. And once you understand that, the answer to what's the best time to exercise becomes much clearer and much less stressful. Before we talk about morning, afternoon, or evening exercise, we need to anchor this entire conversation in one simple truth. High blood sugar is not caused by carbohydrates. High blood sugar is caused by insulin resistance. When fat builds up inside your muscle and liver cells, it interferes with insulin signaling. Think of insulin like a key and your cells like locks. When the lock is clean, the key turns easily. Glucose flows into the cell. Blood sugar stays stable. But when fat accumulates inside the cell, it's like gum jammed inside the lock. The key still shows up, but it doesn't turn properly anymore. That's insulin resistance. And here's why exercise is so powerful. Your muscles are the largest glucose sink in your body. They are where most of the glucose you eat is supposed to go. So when your muscles are insulin resistant, glucose has nowhere to go. It stays circulating in your bloodstream longer than it should, which leads to higher insulin, more fat storage, more metabolic stress. Exercise changes that. Exercise basically supercharges the sponge. It pulls glucose into muscle cells in two powerful ways. First, it improves insulin sensitivity over time by helping clear fat from muscle cells and improving mitochondrial function. Second, it activates insulin-independent glucose uptake, meaning muscles can pull glucose in even if insulin signaling isn't working perfectly yet. That's why exercise can lower your blood sugar even when your diet hasn't changed. But timing matters because your body is not the same at 7 a.m. as it is at 3 p.m. or 8 p.m. Your body runs on rhythms. Your cortisol rhythm changes, your insulin sensitivity rhythm changes, your liver glucose output rhythm changes. And once you understand those rhythms, you stop asking, what's the best time for everyone? And start asking the better question, what's the best time for my physiology? Morning exercise, powerful, but intensity matters. Let's start with morning workouts. In healthy individuals, insulin sensitivity is often higher earlier in the day. But here's the nuance that matters for people with insulin resistance, especially women over 40. Many people with type 2 diabetes wake up with elevated cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. One of its jobs is to raise blood glucose by telling your liver to release stored glucose. That's part of what's called the dawn phenomenon. So if you wake up with high glucose, that doesn't mean your body is broken. It means your liver is responding to hormones. Now, here's where exercise timing becomes important. If you do low to moderate intensity movement in the morning, something like a brisk walk or light cycling, your muscles pull glucose in through insulin-independent pathways. That often lowers glucose quickly. But if you do very intense exercise first thing in the morning, especially fasted, something different can happen. High intensity exercise increases adrenaline and cortisol, and those stress hormones can temporarily raise blood glucose even though the workout workout is beneficial long-term. Research has shown intense exercise can transiently increase glucose because of stress hormone release. So if you've ever done a hard morning workout, checked your glucose, and watched it go up instead of down, I want you to hear this clearly. That response is not failure. It's physiology. And the solution usually isn't to stop exercising. It's simply to adjust the intensity or timing so your nervous system works with you instead of against you. Now let's talk about the afternoon, because this is where things get really interesting. A landmark study published in Cell Metabolism looked at how time of day influences exercise benefits and found that afternoon exercise improved glucose control more than morning exercise in individuals with overweight or obesity. But the most fascinating research came from a randomized controlled trial published in Diabetology. Researchers compared morning high-intensity interval training, also known as HIIT, versus afternoon high-intensity interval training in men with type 2 diabetes. The results were dramatic. Afternoon high-intensity interval training improved 24-hour glucose control. Morning high-intensity interval training actually worsened glucose control in the short term. This changes the conversation because the body's ability to handle glucose naturally declines later in the day. And if you are insulin resistant, that decline is even stronger. So afternoon exercise acts like a metabolic correction. You're strengthening the weakest part of your day. And that shift in physiology changes how glucose is handled across the day. You're working with your metabolism instead of against it. Now let's talk about evening workouts, because this is where people often get nervous. They worry evening exercise will ruin sleep. They worry it will spike cortisol. And yes, very intense workouts right before bed can disrupt sleep for some people. But moderate exercise in the early evening can actually improve glucose control overnight. A study in Diabetology found that afternoon and early evening training often results in better glycemic control than early morning exercise. Here's why. Your liver releases glucose overnight. If your liver is insulin resistant, it releases too much glucose. That's why fasting glucose becomes stubborn. When you improve insulin sensitivity with late afternoon or early evening movement, your muscles store more glycogen and your liver becomes less stressed. So overnight glucose release decreases. In simple terms, evening exercise helps calm the liver before the overnight window begins. And that's why some people see their fasting glucose improve dramatically when they move after dinner. But timing is only half the story. Now, here's the part people miss. Timing matters, but exercise type matters even more, because a morning walk is not the same physiological event as a morning high-intensity interval training session. Let's break it down. HIIT training is powerful, but not always the best. High-intensity interval training can be incredibly effective for improving insulin sensitivity. Research in the Journal of Sports Medicine showed that just 2 weeks of HIIT training improved insulin sensitivity in people with type 2 diabetes. Mechanistically, high-intensity interval training increases GLUT4 activity and improves mitochondrial function. But again, if done during a time when cortisol is already elevated, the short-term glucose spike can confuse people, which is why many individuals respond better to high-intensity interval training later in the day. Steady cardio, aka the glucose stabilizer. Steady movement like brisk walking or cycling tends to lower glucose more predictably, especially after meals. A diabetes care study showed that breaking up sedentary time with walking significantly reduced post-meal glucose spikes. That's why a simple 10 to 15 minute walk after meals can be one of the most powerful blood sugar tools available. Resistance training, essential for muscle glucose uptake. If you're over 40, resistance training becomes critical because muscle is your glucose disposal infrastructure. A randomized trial in diabetes care showed resistance training significantly improved insulin sensitivity in older adults with type 2 diabetes. Building muscle increases glycogen storage capacity and reduces intramyocellular fat. It literally upgrades your metabolic engine. So what's the best time to exercise and what's the best type of exercise? Here's the truth. The best time to exercise is the time you can do consistently. Consistency beats optimization. But physiologically, for many people with insulin resistance, afternoon and early evening training often improves 24-hour glucose control. Morning low-intensity movement can lower glucose without stressing the nervous system. Post-meal walking is one of the most reliable spike-flattening tools. Resistance training builds the metabolic infrastructure for long-term glucose control. And when you combine this with a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet that clears fat from liver and muscle cells, you stop chasing blood sugar numbers. You start restoring normal physiology. Start with this simple plan. Walk 10 to 15 minutes after at least one meal per day. Add resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. Experiment with scheduling harder workouts later in the day. And most importantly, focus on improving insulin sensitivity, not micromanaging glucose hour by hour. If this video helped you, comment guide below and we'll send you our free Mastering Diabetes guide that walks you step by step through restoring insulin sensitivity naturally. And if you want to see what this looks like in real life, go read the case studies on our website, masteringdiabetes.org. Remember, you are not broken. Your metabolism is adaptable. And with the right timing, the right training, and the right nutrition, you can absolutely lower your blood sugar and reclaim your health. Until next time, keep those carbs high and that A1C low.